Welcome to another episode of Tan's Two Cents. Today, we're shining a light on Space Coast, why it's the next big thing in GovCon, and what's still on Tony Brown's bucket list for the region. I'm Tanwilson, your host, and joining me here today is my friend Tony Brown. This guy is deep in the Space Force world in Florida, and he's been that way for the last few years. Tony, welcome to our show today and say hello to our intellectual listeners and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Hello, intellectual listeners. And Tom, thank you so much for having me as a guest on this show. Tony Brown, TM3 Solutions. I'm the director of the Value Added Reseller Division, which basically is the IT arena, hardware and software, all things. Came onto the company about 3 years ago to start that particular role within the company. Okay. And also the AFCEA Space Coast, founder and president of the chapter here. Really exciting. That's basically who I am right now.
Well, you're so much more. You are a super mega connector. I know that you and I are former DMV people. So we've since moved out of DMV. You before COVID or during COVID, me afterwards and stuff. And, I think we're here to prove that there is life outside the DMV and there's life and government contracting that goes on outside there.
And it's funny you say that too. When I came down from Florida 10 to 15 years ago, I still thought DC was the holy grail of government. And when I got down here, kind of trying to find my way around, and this is preluding of where the Space Coast chapter started actually. And we're talking pre-COVID. So I called it the triangle. I'm basically flying up to DC, coming back to Tampa, and then coming back over near home, near St. Augustine. And it was just interesting to really learn that there is a contracting
Mhm.
world outside of outside of DC. When COVID hit, not much changed in Florida. It changed everywhere else. We could still have face to face meetings. So I really never got an idea of total closure for like the whole country experience. But it allowed me to have a chance to realize that I could actually sit down in Florida and actually still do business and government contracting and in the federal arena. And it became really exciting to not only have to hop on a plane all the time, but actually to do business in my backyard, which an hour to 2 hours would get you to the other side of the state. I'm sorry, not an hour, but 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then as I started to spend a lot of time over in Tampa at the AFCEA chapter there, I was the small business president or chair, and I actually got tired of driving across I-4, and it was this what if moment, and this what if moment was kind of scary because I knew nothing about space, and
Yeah.
and I and it was really tough. But then I thought, Ton, who really does know anything about space? I mean, we've only been exploring space for the last 70 years, and it is one of the most infinite ecosystems. It is the most infinite ecosystem in our whole environment. So we're very novice about what we know about space. So I figured I'd go along for the ride.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I remember when, when your chapter started and we were talking about it before it even became a chapter. So I love that I was just recently down there and was able to kind of witness the incredible community that you've built. So seeing it firsthand was really kind of rewarding a couple weeks ago. So
Yeah,
kudos to you.
yeah, and Ton, it was really exciting to see you down here, and it was really a very surreal moment because our chapter had just had its 1 year anniversary,
Yeah.
and and retired General Susan Lawrence came down, and we decided that we weren't even going to have a topic. We were just going to celebrate the anniversary, which was really just extremely exciting. And then all of a sudden, you're in town, And it was just so surreal because we had had so many conversations. And I remember,
Mhm.
I think it was last year, you said, Tony, I want to get into space a little. Walk me through this. And I'm like, I don't know what to really tell you. I mean, I'm here, you're there, but then you're in Texas, which is another uh, historical ecosystem for the space program. So we are in two big states that actually have their whole a lot of their ecosystem is around space. So it's
Yes,
really
I'm not
exciting.
I'm not that far from Johnson Space, so um, this is going to be a really fun discussion here because I'm going to learn so much, and so will our intellectuals here today. But before we get all serious and whatnot, let's I want to ask you a fun question here. If you could pick three people, dead or alive, to take into space with you on the shuttle, who would they be and why?
Three,
You can only take three. Yeah.
three. Okay, all right. I'm an F1 fan, and I have my Space Force shirt on. And you don't know where I'm going with this, by the way.
No.
But I have my Ferrari red Space Force shirt on. Okay. I would like to take Lewis Hamilton with me, Sir Lewis Hamilton. Okay.
Okay. And who is he and why?
He's a 7-time F1 Grand Prix champion. He's tied for first with Michael Schumacher, and I think everyone knows I love fast cars. I love
Yes, you do.
racing, and I've always wanted to just sit and talk to this guy and pick his brain. So, and I
Well,
think
there
he's
you go.
really cool. So, Lewis
So that's your
Hamilton,
first person. The
right?
second person?
Let's not take it in order. I'm just saying who would be.
Okay.
Okay, all
That's
right.
one
So
person.
I'm thinking Neil Armstrong. I'd like to take him up, and it would be the whole new space program and all of the technology. I think it would be just so great to ride into space with Neil Armstrong.
Very cool.
One more person.
One more person.
Ah, Barack Obama. Would love to have conversations with him going to space. I just think it would be very intriguing and just I have so many questions I want to ask him, and so that would be my third person.
Well, there you go. Tony Brown's space crew. Fantastic. So let's dive into our first segment here, and let's talk Space City, right? So Space Coast story starts way before rockets. It's rooted in decades of air and missile defense. So Tony, how did the region's existing military infrastructure kind of accelerate the growth of Space Coast GovCon ecosystem?
Wow. It, when I when I look at the Space Coast region, one, Tana, if you don't mind, I'm probably going to go on a little tangent here. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I watched the steel industry decline. I remember when I was a kid, there would be the streets were orange, and that was from Russ going down the streets. I mean, it's not funny, but Russ running down the street because of all of the sulfur and pollution in the city. And the steel industries, uh, closed down. And actually, my mom decided to leave the area and get one of the what they called back then one of those good government jobs. So that's how I ended up in DC. So the city kind of went downhill, and then it grew at some point. And it kind of reminds me of the Cape Canaveral region. With the shuttle program and all of that, it was just such a thriving city there. And then, once the shuttle program got sunsetted, a lot of jobs were lost, and it became fairly desolate to some degree because it took a big hit. And as within the last, I would say 10 years, maybe, I would say 10 or maybe, yeah, I would say about 10 years with SpaceX and all of the other mission partners, ULA, Blue Origin, and I can probably keep naming a bunch of companies and commercial payloads. And then all of a sudden, we have the creation of a Space Force. And then you had the DoD perspective. And remember, uh, Space Force 4 to 5 years old, 5 years old, right? I mean,
Yeah, they're not that old.
right, exactly. So to see everything going on and starting really from a ground floor scenario has just been just really exciting for the region. And when I say ground floor, it is ground floor. I mean,
Mhm.
a new government agency trying to figure out and be the best that they can at their mission in numerous different ways.
Yeah. So, I think for most of us before Space Force, the only thing that we thought about space was NASA, right? So how much of a partnership do you see there in the region?
I am Ton, I'm so happy you asked that question. So, another thing, again, coming back from my DMV background, uh, when agencies, when governments, and when people collaborate, I just think that's the most
Mhm.
wonderful scenario possible. I consider that the beauty of mankind. And when, as we're starting to look at all these organizations, I I kind of saw maybe some disconnect at NASA and Space Force, and of course because Space Force was just getting in the region, there's not going to be very much collaboration, especially with a civilian agency and also a DoD. You know how that goes. So anyway, as we've started to look at the ecosystem, there is a lot more collaboration, and just recently, I'm part of uh, this I would call it kind of an innovation group called Jedi, because remember in space we always want to have neat little
Really
terms,
cool
and
names.
and it's an acronym that makes sense, right? So I'm part of this
Okay.
Jedi Council. And the other day, one of the stakeholders down at an innovation center that supports the Patrick, actually all tenants at Patrick, it's called the Forge. And in one of these meetings, someone says, "Does anybody know anybody from NASA?" And I was like, "I do." And I'm like, and and I know innovation folks, and I'll invite them to one of our next meetings. And literally, I sent an email out to two folks over at NASA, and they were like, "Oh, we would love to come over there." So we're starting to see more of that
Yeah.
uh, kind of collaborative. And one other thing I wanted to add on to that. So I think it was Crew Mission 72. Now that's scary that I can actually remember these things, right? So there was a crew mission, and I believe it was 72. No, it might have been 71, where the first Space Force Guardian went into space, and I got to witness that launch, which was very exciting. So we're starting to see things like that happen.
Yeah, no, exactly. Fed Civ and DoD don't usually like trust each other and work together, so it's good. It's got to eventually kind of happen. So um, yeah, I love the name Jedi. So I'm not a big Star Wars fan, but I can totally appreciate where we're going with that acronym.